Today we start chapter 2, okay? Remember, chapter 1, we went through and talked about, we jumped through a couple of billions of years, getting to the point where humans have developed agriculture, and by developing agriculture, we see the foundations of complex societies, okay? Promise I'll come back to this for those of you that are still writing. And so in this chapter and the next chapter, we're going to look at some of those early complex societies where agriculture not only happened, but it allowed, all of the things that we talked about. Surplus of food means people don't starve to death. So more people equals more food. And of course, once you have so much food, not everyone needs to be a farmer anymore. So people are free to pursue other interests that don't rely exclusively on where am I going to get my next meal. Okay, and so we begin to see the development of arts and crafts and primitive manufacturing, and then people break off into religious leaders and rulers and all of this other stuff. And so we begin to see then, like I said, complex societies. We're going to start off with the society right here between the Tigris and the Euphrates. We're going to look at Egypt. We're going to look at India. And of course, we're going to look at China. Okay, so, all right. Now, for agriculture to happen, and we've already briefly talked about this, obviously you need water. Okay? Remember that agriculture isn't just the crops, but we're also talking about the animals that people have captured and domesticated. All right, and of course, us as humans, all right, we're going to dehydrate, so we also need water. And so, in some areas, okay, obviously you get the water from the rain, it collects in the table, it goes through, then you dig a well, and then you get your water, okay? Once again, promise I'll come back, all right? The problem here, though, is that 3 out of these 4, okay, actually developed in deserts. All right, so it's like you don't get a lot of rain. And so that is why, in this case, a lot of the early societies that we're going to look at developed along rivers. Okay, so the rivers are the source of water that they need for their crops, their animals, and themselves. All right, now, the earliest humans that developed their settlements along the rivers, okay, basically what happens is that in the springtime, most of these rivers flood and they overflow, okay, and they go off into whatever valleys and fields and whatnot, okay. When the rivers do this, they dump all kinds of nutrients into the soil so that when the water either recedes or evaporates, okay, the soil is left with very, very rich nutrients. Okay, and of course, you need that in order for crops to be able to grow. All right, now, once again, promise I'll come back. The reason why this society develops first is because not only is there one river to do all of this, we literally have 2 of them. So the soil between these 2 rivers is especially fertile. Things grow really, really easily and really, really quickly. Okay? Now, not long after, okay, humans begin to develop civilizations along these rivers, obviously, lots of food, more people, more food, more people, okay? You're going to get, pretty overcrowded in some areas. And so humanity somehow learns the concept of irrigation, which is getting the water to go from where it is and where there's a lot to where there's only a little bit. And so now we can expand that agricultural base. The other thing, okay, and I promise, last look at the map, okay? The other thing is that all of these areas where society developed, they're all in a pretty warm or temperate climate, okay? It doesn't happen in Europe first because no major rivers, but also it gets, especially up here, gets pretty cold in the winter. Just look outside, all right? Kind of like that, all right? I have a friend from New York that calls it Utica Gray, okay? So yeah. So you do get these societies developing along rivers and in very, very warm climates. Okay. Now, that's not to say that there aren't exceptions. There are some settlements that do develop in random places, but the very first cities, like the big developments where you have all of this like art and culture and pottery and tapestry and baskets and wheels and all of that other, and religion and kings and all of this other stuff happens along rivers. Okay? Now, we will start with the very first one. Okay? Now, some of the first ones, okay? Between 3,500 and 2,000 BCE, so anywhere from 4,000 to like 5,500 years ago, we begin to see these first cities. Now remember, okay, agriculture first develops amongst humans between 10,000 and 7,000 BCE. Okay, so it's not as if humans figure out how to grow crops and then suddenly, boom, we've got major cities. Okay, it takes about 5,000 years for this whole process where we have enough food, we don't starve, population grows, so now we have more food, so more population, and then people start specializing in skills, and this settlement grows into a village, this village grows into a town, this town grows into a city, all right? Takes about 5,000 years for all of that development to happen, okay? And so, now, like I said, Tigris and Euphrates, along the Nile, and along the Indus River, which modern-day India, okay? The rest of it, I literally just copied and pasted from the last chapter, all right? I know. So if you're busy writing all this down, you don't have to, but if you want to, that's fine, okay? But it's more as a reminder, okay, that when we get these food surpluses, not everyone has to be a farmer. So we begin to see specialization, okay, in these various areas, okay? And once we get that specialization, then yes, we begin to see a complex society where different people have different roles, okay? And then of course, at some point, we get the rise of governments, okay? Because who is going to make the rules? Who's going to enforce the rules? Who's going to determine what is fair? Who's going to determine who gets how much water and who gets what pieces of land? And who determines, all of these other things? Okay? This next slide, I swear. Oh no, that's not cut and paste. Okay? Now, one of the things that happens along these 5,000 years, okay, from when humans first start growing things and taming animals to, we get these complex cities, all right? It doesn't just happen, people don't just do whatever. We also see the development of technology, all right? And I know today we think technology, like cell phones and iPad. No, okay? Think much more primitive, okay? Remember, because people are specializing, some people discover that they can start working with metals, that they find these things in the earth, and if you heat it up enough, you can shape it into things that are useful, okay? During this time, we also see people realizing that, these trees aren't just good for fire. We can sculpt it and shape it into things that make life a little better, okay? Stoneworking as well. We don't just have to look at a big giant piece of rock. We can cut it and shape it into things that we need. Now, one of the inventions during this time is the invention of the wheel, okay? And so by inventing the wheel, eventually people begin to develop things that, you can roll it along, and at first you just kind of, roll and then have to move another thing and then roll and then move it back to but eventually someone figures out how to build primitive wagons, and so now we don't have to carry all our shit everywhere. Okay, we can put it and then we can push it on this wheeled, basket type of thing, and so yes, okay. Textiles, all right, you don't just have to put on the animal skin and cover yourself up. People begin to how to figure out how to take the actual hair from the animal, process it, and then weave it into cloth, and then you can make it into, various things of clothing. All right, same thing with leather and whatnot. Okay, people discover ceramics and those pretty rocks that we have found just randomly. Hey, this actually looks good. You love my earrings? Yeah, no, my necklace. Okay, all of these different things. All right, that serve to distinguish them. Okay, now obviously, as we gain this ability, people begin then to travel and realize that the society that's over that hill, okay, they have certain things that we don't have over here. And so we begin to see trade and commerce in the sense that, okay, I will give you 2 pounds of wheat for these really, really pretty rocks that you find that don't exist over here, but on the other side of that hill where Madison lives, they do. Okay, so we figure out how to trade for these things. Okay, now, one of the things that humanity discovers during this time, they discover various metals, as I mentioned. Okay, but, and this is important. Okay, they realize that if they take one of the metals, copper, and they heat it up, and then they take another metal that they've also discovered called tin. If you heat them up and let them blend together, and then you let it cool down, you get an even stronger metal called bronze. Okay, and it was the people in Mesopotamia, in this area, that discovered this. Okay, it becomes so important, and for thousands of years, this is like the dominant metal on Earth. That, what do we call this era? The Bronze Age, yeah, bless you. We gave it an entire name, the Bronze Age, because, humanity discovered this way of taking okay metal and a weak metal, and you melt them, and you put them together, and you let it cool, and maybe, let's say, you shape it into different things, and it's stronger than either bronze or tin on its own. Okay, so yeah, it lasts for thousands of years until humanity discovers iron.
The other day you were talking about how in early civilization people had to experiment with different things like mushrooms to eat them. This one killed me, this one made me see God, this one.
Yeah.
I wonder if they did that with lighting things on fire too.
Yes. Oh, definitely. Okay, because there's no instruction manual. And even when you did figure it out, you just kind of tell, okay, son, sorry, because it was passed down from father to son. Yeah, if you light this shit on fire, just wait a little bit and you're going to get these really cool results. And that's basically what you do. That's basically how they came up with it. On occasion, it happens by accident, okay? And there's all kinds of instances, The only one, for some reason, I must be hungry, was the potato chip. All right, somebody was just cutting up potatoes, and one of them fell into a boiling vat of oil. And when they finally got it out, they're like, ooh, it's crispy. Hey, that's not bad. Okay, so it's not as if someone was saying, hey, what happens if we throw different vegetables into boiling oil? Type of thing. All right, but yes, that's basically how people came up with this. All right, and then of course, over those 5,000 years, they perfected the process so that now that we're doing it on purpose, okay, we do this amount of bronze this amount of copper and this amount of tin, and different combinations will give you a slightly different either shape or strength or malleability or whatever. Okay? Now, good question. Good comment. Thank you. Now, along these thousands of years, once again, and one of you asked me after class last time, okay, we begin to see a division in the groups of people. We begin to see, number one, a rise in social classes, because as different people begin to work and do different things, okay, little by little, certain jobs begin to take on either more importance or bigger priority than others. The irony is that in most of these societies, the farmers and the laborers are regulated to the lower classes, even though it's because of them that society developed in the first place. Whereas like priests and leaders and those that work with either metal or stone or jewelry, they're the ones that get priority. And of course, we already talked about this, that change in gender roles. When humans were hunter-gatherers, what was the man's responsibility? And what was the woman's responsibility? Gather. Okay? Well, now, okay, we see a change in that. And once again, sorry, ladies. Your job is cook, clean, have babies, and that's about it. Okay? Very little change in that from society to society. Okay? Some of the other divisions that we begin to see, because as we get the development of cities, okay, the people who live in the city, and I'm just drawing a big square because they had walls, but you can draw a better city, come on over here. Okay, no one's taking me up on that. All right, so as you get a city, okay, the city people begin to see themselves better, and then that's their crops, and that's their house, and that's their sheeps. All right, they see themselves better than the people who live on the farms. And so we see this division like, oh, well, I live in the city, I don't get my hands dirty, I have a nice stone house or stone apartment. Whereas you live out in the middle of nowhere where it's mud and dirt and gross, and you work in the dirt and you get dirty and then you touch animals and, so we see that difference, okay? But of course, do they need each other? Yes. Okay, because in the city, this is where the basket, bless you, this is where the basket maker lives, and the person who makes bronze, the blacksmith. And this is where, the person who makes wagons and the person who makes tools lives. All right, and so those people need the food that the farmers produce. Okay, and of course, the farmers, hey, if we're going to have a really good farm, then we need the blacksmith who makes, bronze. We need the metal worker who turns that bronze into plows and into other things that we use on the farm. Obviously, in order to kill the sheep, we need knives. So the person makes those things. In order to carry our vegetables and our fruits, and we need the basket maker who lives in the city, all right? So we need them. Oh, and of course, we need the wagon maker to be able to transport them easier. And so, yes, there is a codependent relationship, even though, all right, well, I live in the city. I have my own stone apartment. Type of thing. And yeah, sorry, you live out, you play in dirt and you kill pigs for a living, whatever. Okay? Not regarding that, yes, I just had sausage this morning, thanks to my pig farmer here. Okay, sorry, you're now a pig farmer. All right, so yes, all right, and so there is that interconnect. Okay, now, this, once again, I literally copied and pasted from chapter 1, so you don't have to completely copy it. Remember that outside of this, okay, you still have those pastoralist people Okay? And so while some farmers did have animals, okay, you also have people who had their home base, and maybe they didn't farm, maybe they just had like their tents, their little settlements out on the outskirts, but they dealt mostly with their animals. Okay, and remember, you do need to know the difference. Transhuman or transhumans, okay, they take their animals, and if I could draw on the wall, I would. They take their animals out into the mountains, out into the valleys, and they're gone for 2 months, 6 months, 8 months, while the animals graze, they grow, they get them fatter. Oh, thanks, Rocco. Just slam into me. Yeah, I appreciate that. All right, and then of course, once the animals are fat and they've got all the fluffy wool, then they come back and they do their thing where they shear the wool, or they shear the sheep, and now you have all this wool, or they slaughter a few, or they start milking them, and then, you know, from the milk, they can make things like cheeses and creams and sauces. From the wool, well, now we got to take our wool into the city to the person who knows how to make, you know, fabrics and clothes, and, you know, we sell it to them, and then they are able to sell their clothes to everyone, type of thing. The other type of pastoralists, remember, are those hordes that are wandering through Central Asia back and forth, just following their animals. They exist for the next 10,000 years, living the same kind of lifestyle. In order to keep up with their hordes of animals, what else do they domesticate before anyone else? The horse, yes. From them we get horses, okay? Now, if there's something that they need, because remember, they're nomadic, they just wander, they just follow their animals. How do they get that stuff? Yes, they find this poor little defenseless village, all right, with hard-working farmers and whatnot. And yes, they rape, they plunder, they steal, they burn shit down, they kidnap people, they take it all, and then they just keep going. Because that's what they did back then. It was like to assert dominance over a society like, you know, now you're us type of thing. And in many cases, and once again, ladies, I'm sorry, women were viewed as property. And so it was like, not only are we physically removing you, but we are literally making you us. Yes. All right. Now you're part. Now you have me, inside you, and so yes, you become us type of thing. All right.
Did these people from these like innocent little villages, like, did they ever like, all right, I'll go with you?
I'm sure on occasion,
I'll
yes.
join you, like,
But usually, obviously, they resisted, and usually the hordes didn't say, okay, we're going to get you to the count of 3 to join us. They would just come in and sweep through and take what they wanted. Okay, so, but I'm sure, yes, on occasion, people would be like, okay, yeah, all yours, I'm yours too. All right, so let's go. Okay, and that was existence for tens of thousands of years. Okay, and so once again, the big map. The purple area is where those hordes wandered. Okay, back and forth across Asia. All right. We're going to look at Mesopotamia. We're going to look at Egypt. We're going to look at India. We're going to look at China. Now, this shows some of the other areas. Unfortunately, you know, we're not going to look at all of them, all right? We are going to briefly look at, you know, some of the European societies. We are going to look at some of the societies in the Americas. But for the most part, we're going to focus on these big ones.
Just one more question about the villages.
Yeah.
They would get raided, and then would they like build themselves back up, or would they just like give up?
Most of them would give up. If there were any survivors, they would generally wander to like another village and then just kind of become a part of that society. On occasion, yes, you would have maybe this particular horde didn't kidnap people. They just took your stuff. Maybe they didn't burn your village to the ground, or they only burned like 1 or 2 buildings or something, or huts, I guess I should say, then yes, the people would stay and rebuild their stuff. So it all depended on the level of damage that these hordes went through. And it also all depended on the particular tribe that went through, because some of them were in fact friendlier than others. Okay? And on occasion, if you got lucky, you encountered a group that actually did negotiate with you ahead of time, type of thing. So, all right? Any other? Very good. All right? Now, we're going to look at Mesopotamia. Okay? You do need to know this. Mesopotamia is modern-day Iraq. All right? So if you look at a map, find the country of Iraq, that's where pretty much society started, okay, in that area, okay? Now, the word Mesopotamia actually comes from ancient Greek, and it literally means between the rivers, all right? Because, remember, there were 2 rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. One of them was north, the other one was south of it. How do you remember which one was to the north and which one was to the south? Yes, Tigris looks like tiger. The tiger's on top because it's pouncing, it's jumping on. All right, so you have the Tigris and then you have the Euphrates. Okay, now both the Tigris and the Euphrates would overflow and flood, not just in the springtime, but in just random points of the year, whenever you got any kind of storms or heavy rains, okay? It would flood uncontrollably. And so many times, you know, people would set themselves up in certain areas only to lose everything to these floods, to nature. Of course, the irony is that the fact that the rivers flooded uncontrollably is what made that spot of land perfect for growing crops. All right, you could have a lot of nutrients there. So obviously humans need to figure out how to be able to take advantage of the nutritious soil while at the same time keeping the river in check so that you didn't destroy the crops that grew there easily. Okay, and so little by little, humans in this area come up with various irrigation techniques. Okay, they would build levees, and it's not like today where we think of like, you know, concrete and, you know, reinforced whatever. Okay, it was just dirt. They would just pile more and more dirt on the edges, and so obviously this required constant upkeep and constant maintenance. Eventually humans learn how to build canals and how they could use canals to divert water from one area to another, so that if it did flood, we can use that flooding to our advantage and kind of guide the water into a different place, and that way we could grow more crops. Okay? Now, obviously, since humanity was very primitive, and even today, can we control flooding rivers 100%? No, okay? We still can't, not like, you know, I mean, we can kind of guide things, we can lessen some damage, but not 100%. And so the people of Mesopotamia still suffered, okay? But they were able to kind of channel the power of these 2 rivers to lessen that. Okay, and so we already talked about specifically wheat and barley as the 2 main crops in Mesopotamia, but the Mesopotamians also grew millet, which is another type of grain, and sesame. Okay, now the basic staple of their diet when it came to farming, what do we use wheat for, and to a lesser degree millet and sesame? What do you make out of wheat?
Bread.
Bread. Yeah. Now, it wasn't like, you know, the bread you go down to Price Chopper and buy a delicious loaf. Like, it was a very primitive, kind of gross bread, really hard. Yeah.
Like hardtack?
Yes, like hardtack. All right. But yeah. Okay. But that was the basis of their diet, supplemented by other things, including the various meats from their animals, and of course, you have these transhumant pastoralists who produce milk and other milk products for them. All right, so all of that kind of came together. Now, the thing about Mesopotamia, though, and it's amazing because this, like I said, is the first complex society. It had fertile soil, but that's about it. Okay, so they could grow a lot of food. All right, but then how do we get some of the other stuff? All right, well, we believe that one of the first things that developed, okay, beyond farming, amongst the Mesopotamians was this idea of trade, this idea of traveling to other places. Because, and I promise I'll come back, all right? Here we are, right here. This is where it first develops, okay? All they had to do was follow the river and they would end up in Turkey. Or if they were brave enough to cross over some mountains, they would end up in Iran, okay? Now, and so these areas, okay, like Turkey and Iran, and then those that were really, really brave could wander, into modern day Palestine or Israel, okay? They were able to trade, number one, their food for cedar, okay? Once again, oops, wrong way, okay? Cedar, and historically, not anymore because, humans, but Lebanon was full of cedar trees, okay? That's what Lebanon was famous for at the time, okay? The copper, the precious stones, that could be found in modern day Turkey, so all they had to do was follow the rivers up, or if they were willing to cross the mountains into Iran. Okay, same thing, they worked a lot with something called lapis, which is a blue stone that was used for jewelry, and of course, it was the Mesopotamians that discovered the formula for bronze, but they didn't have it in a tin, so they had to trade for it. They had that secret for a couple hundred years, so they wouldn't tell the people, hey, can I have all the tin that this wheat will buy? And they'd be like, what do you need so much tin for? Oh, just stuff, none of your business. All right, and so, yes, okay, and I'm sorry, I wasn't ignoring you, but...
So for mining and stuff like that, what was the motive? Because they obviously didn't know it was doing so. Was there a motive to mining?
In this case, because these areas, it started off accidentally because some of these areas weren't really suitable for farming, but as they're trying to dig and plow and prep the soil, they're finding these different metals, okay? And so they realize, okay, maybe we can't grow crops, but here's a group of people that has a surplus of food, and they're willing to give us their food for this weird shiny rock, or, these weird hard thing. I don't know why they're so interested in this tin. I mean, they know why, but I don't know why they want it, but if they're willing to give us food, which we're having a hard time growing, then I'm going to keep looking for this metal that these Mesopotamians seem so obsessed over. So yeah, okay. Started by accident, all right, like a lot of things do, and then from there they were able to leverage that to obtain food. Okay, this map is from your textbook once again, and it shows then some of the basic trading routes that Mesopotamians and other people took. When we look at Egypt, when we look at India, okay, we'll talk about their trading networks. But now, this doesn't mean that maybe someone from here traveled all the way to here, but maybe they did travel up to the northern part, and the people that lived here had already traveled over here, and so you do see the exchange of goods that way, okay? Now, some of the early city-states in Mesopotamia, you don't need to memorize these completely, all right? But the city of Eridu, the city of Uruk, all right? The city of Ur. Now, for those of you who are either Jewish or Christian or Muslim, the city of Ur is where Abraham originally came from, all right? Old Testament Abraham, all right? So he was also a Mesopotamian, all right? He took his group, his family, and moved into, what today is called Palestine, all right? Now, looking at these cities, okay? Because once again, we don't have writing yet, okay? So looking at some of these cities, the archaeological remains, all right? Some of the things that we can tell about them, probably the most obvious one, is that they did have not only a belief in gods and whatnot, but it was a very complex system of worship. They had ceremonies, they had festivals, there were particular sacrifices that went to particular gods. They had things that corresponded to spring and summer and fall and winter equinoxes and all of this other stuff, and solstices, and they had certain prayers and certain sacrifices that went to certain gods. And I'm saying gods because, remember, most societies, including Mesopotamia, were polytheistic. Okay? What is polytheism again? Yes, the belief in more than one god. They believed that there were gods for various aspects of nature. Okay? And of course, because they were cities, this is the other evidence that we have, there were complex governing structures, because how do you regulate the various, creators here that are making baskets and metal and weapons and tools and all of the other stuff? And how do you regulate, the various resources that farmers use? And how do you regulate that relationship between the two, and who buys and who sells and how much things are worth? Okay? And of course, since we have complex religion, who is in charge of that? Okay? So, we know that they had developed not just like, I'm the king, you do everything I say or I kill you type of thing, to, rules, enforcement of rules, regulations, punishments, and all of this other stuff that comes with governing a city. Okay? And so most of the early cities happened right here in southern Mesopotamia. Okay, because this is the area where the Tigris and the Euphrates kind of come in the closest, and so when they both flood at the same time, this is especially, fertile soil. Okay, so you have the city of Ur, you have the city of Eridu, Uruk, Lagash, all right, all of those cities, boom, right there in the same general vicinity. Now, most of these cities were independent, which is why we call them city-states, okay? So each city was its own entity, okay? It had its own leaders, it had its own religions, its own gods, its own whatevers, okay? Maybe it included, like I said, on the outskirts where you had the farmers, all right? But they had nothing to do with the other cities. And the only interaction that typically went on was when it came to trade, okay? So here comes a merchant from Ur into, Eridu, saying, hey, I'm, the famous basket maker from Ur, hoping to sell some of my baskets here in Eridu, and I heard you guys have really, really awesome wagons. Wouldn't mind buying a couple wagons and taking them back. All right, so that was pretty much the only contact. All right, now, from the archaeological remains, okay, this is what we have discovered from these various cities. Because while there were minor differences between them, for the most part, this is how they were all structured. Number one, at the center of the city, there was a temple. Okay, and I'm just gonna, draw like a little church there, but it wasn't Christian. All right, so there was a temple in the middle of the city. Okay, and of course, the purpose of humanity, okay, in these ancient religions was to make the gods happy. All right, pardon my French, the gods are assholes, all of them. All right, they make the rivers flood. You can see it, right? Like multiple times a year, the rivers will flood. They will destroy our crops and our houses and everything. We get endless days like this. So obviously the sky god is mad. Okay, maybe we get horrible winds. I don't know if any of you heard it last night. So obviously the wind god is mad. Okay, it is our job as humans to make the gods happy. Bless you. So that the rivers don't flood, or if they do flood, they don't cause a lot of damage. To make the wind slow down, because not only is it scary, but it might knock over a tree or blow my roof off. All right. God damn it, I'm depressed. So I need to keep the sky gods happy, so that there's at least 1 or 2 days of sunshine, get that vitamin D, that serotonin. So humans were here to serve the gods, and of course the priests were here to interpret the will of the gods, and of course lead you in these various ceremonies and sacrifices that would bring happiness to the gods. Okay, we know that there not only were the cities the religious center, but this is where all the buying and selling and trading happened. Okay, so whether it was a foreigner from the city of Ur, or if it was the farmers or the pastoralists who were coming to sell their crops or their sheep wool or whatever milk products they got from milking goats, then boom, all right, it all happened in the city. Okay, now we have found, and once again from both archaeological evidence and we'll eventually get to writing, very primitive writings, the large houses in the city were typically for the priests and the rulers. They were the upper class. Okay, the smaller houses were for the average people, and as the city grew, the houses got smaller and smaller the further away you got from the center. Okay, there was always a central canal that brought water not just to the temple, but who else lived in the center of the city? The priests and the rulers, the wealthy. So that, Priestess Madison here, she'd only have to walk right over here and get her water. There's her bucket and go on back. Okay? Whereas poor Jose, he raises guinea pigs. All right? So he has to walk all the way from outside the city, through the city walls. All right, walking through the streets. Now he gets to the canal, gets his water, and he has to walk back all through the city, through the gates, out in the middle of nowhere to have water for his guinea pigs.
And the people in the center have more protection from
Yes. Okay. When those raiders, when those hordes come in, who's the first people they're getting? The ones outside the city. Yes. Sorry about your guinea pigs. And so, yes, the people in the city are protected, and you're right. If they do breach the city walls, it's the people that live on the outskirts, not the wealthy, the priests, the leaders that are in the middle, who get taken out first. Okay? And so, yeah. We have this social hierarchy and this difference, the rich get better water, better access, better protection, whereas the poor are kind of left to fend for themselves. Her hand was up first. Oh, okay.
Excuse me. Go ahead. My throat's did they have sources of entertainment, or were they always just stressed about the different gods and everything?
Part of their religious beliefs also included festivals,
to thank the gods, okay? And originally, yeah, that's what kept them entertained. That's what brought them, like, you know, happiness and rest. The term holiday actually comes from holy day, okay? So those celebrations to the gods, you know, now we think of, oh, we get to rest, we get to eat with our family, that's how it started, as those, you know, okay, let's be thankful, you know, and let's celebrate. So it isn't always just, oh, shit, we gotta keep these guys happy, okay?
So I know I used an example how he walked all the way to get the water for the guinea pigs, walked all the way back. But did they like not have like a water system? Like did they not have people that like would bring the water or
Eventually, yes, you did have those water vendors, but
was it just like go out for yourself?
most of the time, but if you think of and sorry, Jose, a poor guinea pig farmer, you know, maybe, and please remind me of your name. Dakota here. Dakota's a wagon maker, so she has her wagon shop right here. Okay, wagon maker. Okay, probably makes a little bit more money than a guinea pig farmer, and so maybe Dakota could hire someone to bring water to, you know, because hey, I get thirsty making wagons. Whereas our guinea pig farmer probably had to do it themselves. All right, so yeah, I'm sorry, there's not a lot of money in guinea pigs in 10,000 BCE. All right, so, but definitely wagons. All right, and so, yeah, and so, you know, these are those differences that we begin to see. So as it's kind of interesting because even way back when humanity is first developing, we already see those social differences, like, you know, I'm better than you because I'm one of the priests. And I'm slightly better than you because I make something useful for people and I make damn good money from it. And he's like, I love my guinea pigs. All right, so anyone want to buy my guinea pigs? Type of thing. All right, so yeah. Okay. Okay. Now, which brings us to almost like you read my mind. Okay. We'll finish off talking then about religion, okay? The people's experiences with the gods basically shaped how they saw the world, okay? The gods control everything. We need to, number one, keep them happy so that, you know, they don't destroy us. And if we do survive, then we need to show our appreciation. All right, and those were the happy times. Okay, and I already said this in my answer to Kiara, right? In my answer to Kiara, yes, this is where we get the origins of a lot of our festivals. I don't think there's any society, no matter where it tends to happen, that doesn't celebrate a new year. Like humans understood that something, and then 360 something blah 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 days later, it was again. All right, and so that was a cause for celebration. All right, because yes, we did it. The gods did not destroy us. Okay. And of course, the different cycles, celebrations of the solstices and celebrations of the equinoxes, where you see the change from fall to winter, from winter to spring, those were reasons to celebrate as well. Okay, so there were some happy things. Okay, now, one of the things that we also see from the earliest of time, all right, is that the local religion, and we're going to look at different religions, obviously, but one of the things that all of them have in common is that the king, all right, maybe I need to be the king, was chosen by the gods. Okay? Now, who becomes the next king after Olivia dies? Yes. Which son specifically? the first, the oldest, okay? And up until like, even 150 years ago, people believed that that was divine will. Because if God or the gods, okay, because they're polytheistic, had wanted somebody else to be king, this person either would never have been born, would have died in infancy, something, all right, to make it so that somebody else would be the king, all right? And so, the religious leaders would put that into the minds of the people, so that if you do think about rebelling against the king, who are you really rebelling against? The gods. Okay? You don't want to do that because remember, our gods are assholes. and hell, they make things flood just for no reason. Imagine if you go against their chosen ones. All right? How much more damage is that going to cause? All right? Now, you do need to know the Z word, ziggurats. That was the name of the Mesopotamian temples. That's where they went to perform their worship services, their prayers, their sacrifices. I'm just going to finish showing you an artist's illustration of what a ziggurat was. One of the most interesting things, and if you study other cultures and if you decide to get into history or archaeology or paleontology or whatever, is that for whatever reason, humanity, no matter what the culture, has always exalted gods, all right? Because once again, it doesn't matter which god, but up there, okay? And so they built temples that went up, okay? The Greeks, where did their gods live? Mount Olympus. They lived at the top of a mountain, all right? They were always up there. It's always fascinated me that no matter what the time period, what the belief, whether it's, monotheistic or polytheistic, God or gods are always up somewhere, okay? I don't recommend going to Iraq. Maybe it's a little safer now, all right? But some of the archaeological ruins, this is what's left, all right? And so that's where we get the artist drawings that the ziggurats went like that, okay? But this is the ruins then of a ziggurat from like 5,000 years ago in southern Iraq, all right? I'm gonna stop right here. All right, just a reminder for those of you that walked in late,